Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. It's a big deal in indie comics today. Pre-orders for Isom number 2 have begun. And while I, like a number of other people, plan to put in my pre-order, I do want to take a moment and say the things that I expect to see in this volume of the comic when it comes out. If you watched my review of the previous volume of Isom, you know that I was only lukewarm on it. I reread it just this weekend in preparation for this video, and I would give it a 6 or a 7. My opinion on it hasn't really changed a whole lot. I also stated I was disappointed that I didn't get a full self-contained story in the first volume. I really wanted a clear idea of how July could write a story and handle stakes and characters over the course of a full story arc before I came to a conclusion. So I said I would withhold judgment until the end of the second volume. Well, it turns out, and you may have known this already, but I didn't know it at the time I recorded that video, that July plans for his opening story arc to be 3 volumes. That is a pretty significant investment to make in a story series before I decide whether I'm ready to go with it or not. So, I have a number of things that I really want to see in Isom number 2, which will make up my mind whether or not I continue to follow the Isom series as it unfolds. This video exists to set them out very clearly, and I will reference back to it as I make my review of that comic, once it releases. Now, this does not necessarily apply to other titles in the Rippaverse line. We know, for example, that Chuck Dixon is going to be writing the Alpha Core comic. Likewise, Jen and Sylvia Soska, I'm not quite sure the pronunciation there, but they will be writing a series about the character Yaira. I don't know as I will get into either of those titles as pre-orders. Depends on when they release and what my finances look like at that time. But I do want to take a look at both of those series at some point, both to get an idea of the kind of storytelling we can expect. I expect something pretty good from Chuck Dixon, who is a well-established talent in the field already, and the Soska sisters come from apparently indie horror, so that might be interesting to see as well. And I am interested how the Rippaverse will handle the editorial work of keeping all of these different writers and titles on a kind of coherent theme, and that's all very interesting, but it's not really going to tie back into my decision to continue with Isom or not. Eric showed a pretty competent handling of some aspects of storytelling, but there are also some parts of it that are just missing from the series right now. If I don't see them soon, I'm going to take a step back from it, at least for a while. And if I hear eventually from trustworthy sources that July has gotten a better handle on these elements of storytelling, I may come back and join up with the project again. So, I have 3 things in terms of art and in terms of writing that I would like to see in Isom number 2. First and foremost, for the art, I would like to see a broader variety of expressions in the characters. For the most part, we see characters looking neutral, intense, or angry. We do see a few more positive expressions on characters here and there, and in some of the end page art. Clearly, Cliff Richards is capable of drawing different expressions, at least to a certain extent. I wouldn't call him a master of acting for his characters, but he does a decent job of it. But for the most part, we see people looking neutral, intense, or angry. And maybe that's appropriate to a superhero story with the tone that July is writing. But there are plenty of opportunities in the book where we could see a little more nuanced expression. And I'm not sure if that's a failure of the artist or of the editor for not giving good direction to the artist as they hand in thumbnails and panels. But I would like to see a little more variety there and an understanding of the different ways characters can act under pressure and in different situations. Second, the art sometimes looks a little stiff in the way people are posed. I understand this is a bit to taste, but it looks very much like there was a lot of reference art used in this. There was a lot of 3D models used in this, and the kind of exaggeration and fluid lines that really give art a sense of movement and of power and impact just seems to be a little lacking from the page in Isom number 1. And it would be great if we could see a little more of that brought out in Isom number 2. The third thing that I would really like to see is smoother transitions between panels in the fight scenes. This is something I spent a lot of time talking about in my review video, so if you want to see some concrete examples of that, I would go back and look at that video. But I would like to see the transitions a little smoother, a little easier to follow in future fight scenes. Because there is a lot of fighting in this kind of comic, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. I would just like it to be a little smoother, a little easier to follow what is happening from panel to panel. Writing-wise, I would like to see some very clear stakes for Avery set out. What do I mean by that? Well, I know first of all, he is sent out on a missing persons case. His sister has someone who has gone missing, and Avery has gone out to try and find this missing girl. Well and good, but we don't really know what the stakes are for this person if they remain missing. Have they been sold into prostitution? Are they going to turn up dead? Are they being held hostage for ransom? I don't know. I don't know what the potential bad outcomes of this person disappearing are, except in the most abstract sense that they may turn up dead, which isn't very helpful because we don't like to think about it, but you could turn up dead any day of the week for any reason. If I don't get a clear sense of what could have happened to this girl and who could have done it by the next stage of the story, which is the second act, where we really should be setting up these kind of stakes, really, they should have been set up in the first act, but if you're going to set them up at all, they need to be done by at least the second act. A third act setup for this kind of thing is just too much of a twist for my taste. So if these things are going to be set up, they need to get set up in the second act. And if I don't see them in the second act, that's a sign that I may need to drop out. Second, I want a sense of what exactly an Accept is. These are July's superhumans. I need a sense of what they are, what they can do, to what extent they can do it. We saw some superhuman punching and throwing action in the first act, and I think that's fine. I actually don't think you need to set up powers a whole lot in the first act of a story, but I do want a sense of what Avery's powers are and what their limits are beyond he can't fly, which is the one limit we got established in the first volume. I want a sense of what those are before he goes into the final confrontation. So if I don't see that in the second act either, that may be a sign that July is not really writing a story for me. I know you don't have to make a person's powers explicitly clear in the course of a story, but especially for things like superhuman strength and durability, some kind of marker would be really nice. It would help me get a better sense of how well or how poorly Avery is doing in any given fight. And of course, Avery is not the only Accept in the world, so having some kind of idea what the signposts for those are and what I can expect from them would be nice. This doesn't have to be exhaustive. We don't need an encyclopedia on the subject, but some sense of at least what Avery's limits are by the end of Act 2, that is something I'm going to need. The third thing I need from this project by the end of Act 2 is some sense of who Avery was before he went into early retirement. It's been hinted at a lot in the first act. The second act is where you really need to establish something about your character. And this is less a writing gripe and more an investment gripe. It's fine to have a person with a mysterious history. But if I don't know enough about that history to know the character by a certain point in the story, I am going to lose interest. And while I haven't been lost so far in Isom, I don't know if I want to go out and buy the third part of a story where I'm not sure I'm really going to know the protagonist at all, even after 120 pages. That does bother me a bit. And since Avery's reason for quitting seems to be a really big part of why he's going out and doing what he's doing, that's something I'm going to need laid out for me by the second act of the story. I don't think any of these things are very high hurdles, and I'm in part laying them out because I do expect them to be fulfilled in Isom number 2. Like I said, July seems to have a pretty good grasp on how to tell a story. I think he's just ironing out the kinks right now, and I'm happy to give him another chance to do that. Will he bring the story up to that standard? Well, I guess we're going to find out with Isom number 2. And I will bring my review of that as soon as possible, and I will definitely be referring back to this video in that one. We'll see how things turn out. That's what I got for you today. Let me know what you're hoping for from Isom number 2 down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.